let's delve into the essence of things. True foolishness is not simply a lack of sharp intelligence, but something far more insidious and deeply rooted. It manifests in repetitive behavioral patterns, like a broken record, drawing a person into a kind of mental labyrinth. It's not about isolated mistakes, but their constant repetition, a complete inability to learn from one's own experiences. It's living with closed eyes, ignoring the consequences of one's actions. And the most frightening thing is that a person caught in this trap often doesn't even realize it. As Louise Hay, a prominent author known for her ability to transform lives through the power of positive thinking, said, "Self-awareness is the key to change in any situation." But how can someone who refuses to honestly look at their actions develop? A truly foolish person doesn't see their foolishness, continues to stumble over the same obstacles time and time again, finding excuses instead of taking responsibility. They prefer to blame the world, circumstances, or those around them, as if there is a universal conspiracy against them. This kind of thinking locks them in an invisible prison woven from their own limiting beliefs. Louise Hay explained it best. Our beliefs shape our reality, and if these beliefs are rigid, pessimistic, or distorted, then the world around us will seem like a battlefield. Often the root of suffering lies not in external circumstances, but in the depths of our consciousness that we are afraid to look into. The real tragedy is not in making mistakes, but in refusing to acknowledge them and repeating them again and again, as if they are inevitable. There are people living on autopilot, mired in self-destructive routines that they mindlessly repeat. Negative habits become firmly established in their daily lives, and instead of questioning them, they accept them as an immutable truth. Thus, foolishness becomes not just a character trait, but a way of life. However, the most important thing is that foolishness is not a predetermined fate, but a conscious choice. It thrives where there is a lack of awareness and where people refuse to change. It is important to understand that each of us can unknowingly fall into these traps. To avoid this fate or learn to recognize such tendencies in others, it is necessary to develop the ability to conscious observation. The following will present 6 clear signs that allow you to determine when a person, perhaps even yourself, falls into the nets of foolishness. The first sign is strikingly obvious. Such a person is convinced that they know absolutely everything. Nothing demonstrates greater ignorance than a person who categorically refuses to learn anything new. They are sure that they already have answers to all questions, that they do not need to listen to other people's opinions, question their own beliefs, or update their way of thinking. They stubbornly cling to outdated ideas, as if they are immutable laws of the universe. Instead of developing, they simply get stuck in place. Louise Hay emphasized that an open mind is the cornerstone of personal growth. But this type of person does not listen, does not read, does not ask questions, but only speaks, and with a confidence that is as blind as it is dangerous. They are not interested in wisdom. They only seek to impose their opinion on others. This phenomenon is related to the well-known Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology, which demonstrates a curious and disturbing fact. The less a person knows, the more confident they are in their rightness. In other words, ignorance breeds arrogance. This can be observed everywhere. People who have watched a couple of videos on the internet consider themselves experts in politics, economics, or healthcare. People who are convinced that their personal experience is enough to refute scientific research or years of professional experience. But the saddest thing's that they are not just misinformed, but unaware of it. And being unaware, do not strive for change. This attitude subtly destroys their lives. They do not develop because they are convinced that they already know everything. They do not strive for the best because it does not even occur to them that they may be wrong. And since no one respects an arrogant and poorly informed person, they find themselves isolated, experience disappointment, and get stuck in a vicious cycle. This kind of thinking, as Louise Hay warned, blocks the flow of abundance, love, and health that is available to each of us. A person who considers themselves to be the possessor of absolute truth closes the doors to learning, growth, and positive change. A true sage chooses a completely different path. It is marked by humility, surrounds themselves with people who surpass them in intelligence, is not afraid to ask for advice, carefully studies different points of view, and most importantly, has the flexibility of mind that allows them to change their beliefs. He realizes that knowledge is not a final destination, but a continuous journey. We recall the words of Socrates, who claimed that a wise person is one who recognizes the limits of their knowledge. Therefore, a person who never questions their beliefs, does not seek new knowledge, and does not allow for the possibility of error, demonstrates not wisdom, but only stubbornness. And this stubbornness becomes an obstacle to harmonious relationships, missed opportunities, and personal growth. The second obvious sign of a person who has fallen into the trap of foolishness is their inability to take responsibility, their constant willingness to make excuses. If they make a mistake, anyone is to blame but themselves. They were deceived, they were unlucky, the economic situation is to blame, society, the boss, the partner, the whole world is against them. When their decisions lead to negative consequences, they refuse to acknowledge their involvement. When their relationships fall apart, they claim that all women are the same. When their projects fail, they find justification in the fact that the system did not give them a chance. They are so immersed in their impenetrable bubble of denial that no truth can reach them. Louise Hay taught us that the first step towards positive change in any area of life is recognizing our responsibility, not guilt, but specifically responsibility for our thoughts, words, and actions. Without this sense of responsibility, we are like a ship without a rudder or sails, helplessly drifting on the waves of fate. Taking full responsibility for one's life is not an easy task. For many people, this test seems almost impossible. Why? Because responsibility forces us to face an unpleasant truth. We ourselves are the architects of our reality, and if our life does not improve, the problem is most likely not in the external world, but in ourselves. For a person who has not reached emotional maturity, this realization can be too painful. It is much easier to blame the boss, the government, the partner, or even bad luck for one's failures. But as Louise Hay rightly noted, by shifting blame onto others, we deprive ourselves of power, and without this personal power, it is impossible to achieve positive change. Responsibility is not just a virtue, it is a vivid manifestation of emotional maturity and practical intelligence. A person who avoids responsibility for their decisions and their consequences is doomed to stagnation. They will repeat the same mistakes over and over again, while remaining convinced that the world has conspired against them. When a person becomes fixated on the role of a perpetual victim, they voluntarily cut themselves off from the source of their inner strength. If their financial affairs leave much to be desired, they tend to blame the treacherous system. If their physical shape is far from ideal, then genes inherited from their ancestors are to blame. And if their career growth is not working out, then of course, it is due to the boss's personal dislike. Thus, a convenient but destructive story is born, in which all events are supposedly outside the zone of personal control. And the saddest thing is that the deeper a person delves into this illusion, the less effort they make to change the situation. As Louise Hay wisely noted, Many people prefer to put up with familiar discomfort rather than meet their reflection in the mirror. They are willing to resort to the most ridiculous excuses in order to avoid honest self-analysis. And this vicious cycle, repeating day after day, year after year, shapes a life full of disappointment and missed opportunities. What happens when a person stubbornly refuses to take responsibility for their life? First, they lose the respect of others, because people, even if not always allowed, unmistakably recognize those who live in a world of endless excuses. But what is even worse, they lose self-respect, dooming themselves to stagnation and depriving themselves of the opportunity to grow and develop. And the most painful thing is that they hand over control of their life into the hands of others. After all, at the moment when you utter the fateful, "It's not my fault," you automatically acknowledge your powerlessness to change anything. You voluntarily give up the reins, depriving yourself of the opportunity to act. The difference between a wise person and a fool becomes obvious. A fool looks for someone to blame. A wise person looks for solutions. A fool complains about circumstances. A wise person adapts to them. A fool avoids discomfort. A wise person boldly faces it, understanding that growth is only possible through overcoming difficulties. That is why many people continue to flounder in the swamp of poverty, unhappy relationships, or bitterness. They simply refuse the necessary inner work. At the same time, those who take responsibility for their lives, who acknowledge their mistakes and learn from them, continue to move forward, build, and develop. Therefore, ask yourself a question that requires the utmost honesty. Are you taking full control of your life, or are you telling yourself fairy tales to justify your own inertia? Believe me, the answer to this question has the potential to change everything. Let's move on to the third undeniable sign of a person caught in the web of foolishness: their inability to control their own emotions. This quality, like a bright beacon, signals an immature mind. Imagine a ship drifting aimlessly in the ocean. It is entirely at the mercy of the waves and wind, defenseless against the fury of the storm. Similarly, a person who has not learned to manage their feelings is incapable of a calm and wise response, but only reacts impulsively to what is happening, shouting, raging, falling into despair, or simply running away from conflict, like an ostrich burying its head in the sand. Louise, an outstanding psychologist, spoke of the great power contained in the ability to respond, not react. After all, when we act without thinking about the consequences, we allow our most primitive instincts to take over. And these emotional decisions usually cost us dearly. Consider the typical hot-tempered person. They are irritated by any trifle, a traffic jam, a delay in responding to a message, even the most harmless criticism. They mistakenly believe that their anger is a manifestation of strength, but in reality, it is just a mask hiding a deep weakness. Someone who is unable to control their inner state inevitably becomes a puppet of external circumstances. Every minor annoyance is blown out of proportion, and every obstacle is perceived as a personal threat. Instead of looking for constructive solutions, they allow themselves to be overwhelmed by waves of anger, disappointment, and resentment. This is the very person who, when stressed, makes rash purchases, quits their job in a fit of rage, or throws hurtful words in the heat of an argument, which they later bitterly regret. But alas, time cannot be turned back. And what do they do next? They blame the whole world again for their troubles, traffic jams, a slow partner, a bad day, but never admit their own fault, their inability to control their emotions. The most common misconception among insecure men is that aggression is synonymous with strength. They naively believe that raising their voice or imposing their opinion is a display of courage. But true strength, as we know, lies in self-control. A person who does not control their emotions is easily manipulated. You just need to know which buttons to push to throw them off balance. They are doomed to live in constant emotional tension, like a pendulum swinging from side to side, at the mercy of circumstances. Their world will depend on the whims of the weather, traffic congestion, or the mood of those around them. As a result, they will destroy relationships, ruin career prospects, and undermine their physical and mental health with their own hands. In contrast, a wise person remains calm in any situation. They understand that emotions, no matter how strong they may be, are fleeting, like a summer rain. They do not allow them to overwhelm them, but only observe them from the side, analyze them, and only then make a conscious decision. They do not need to raise their voice to gain respect. They know when to speak and when to remain silent. They understand that it is not about suppressing feelings, but about knowing how to channel them in the right direction. They turn anger into motivation, stress into a stimulus to action, drawing valuable lessons from every emotional experience, rather than becoming its victim. And here it is important to remember the words of Louise Hay. We cannot control external circumstances, but we can always choose our reaction to them. This is exactly what truly intelligent people do. They pause before reacting, give themselves time to understand their feelings, and then consciously choose how to act. This pause, this moment of reflection, is where emotional wisdom is born. Emotional mastery is not just a sign of maturity, it is the foundation of true personal power. When a person learns to manage their inner world, they take a huge step towards a fulfilling and happy life. The key to success lies in developing self-awareness, that is, in being able to notice when strong emotions begin to take over, and consciously switch their attention into a rational and balanced response. A person who is unable to control their internal processes is unlikely to be able to cope with external challenges. Louise Hay repeatedly emphasized that our thoughts and feelings shape our reality. Therefore, if a person lives guided by anger, anxiety, and disappointment, their world will reflect this inner chaos. No matter how strong they seem externally, if they are a slave to their emotions, they are like a chip thrown into a raging sea. True strength is manifested not in shouting or impulsive actions, but in equanimity, in the ability to remain calm when others lose control, in making informed decisions even under pressure. That's the kind of power that builds empires, creates lasting relationships, and lives a meaningful life. Let's look at another common trap men fall into, slowing their progress. Choosing an environment made up of people who drag them down. A person's immediate surroundings are like an X-ray predicting their future. Just watch who they spend most of their time with, and you can confidently say where they're headed. This is where one of the most underrated but critical decisions anyone can make comes into play. Consciously choosing their environment. Naive or short-sighted people often make a fatal mistake. They surround themselves with those who reflect their own limitations, negative attitudes, endless complaints, lack of ambition, destructive habits, and worst of all, those who support them even in moments of self-destruction. These may be people who constantly complain without offering solutions, those who prefer to spend time on meaningless entertainment instead of creating something meaningful, those who agree with everything and never challenge you to grow, those who are mired in a routine of mediocrity and don't want anyone in their circle to break out. Louise Hay wisely noted that our environment is an external reflection of our inner world. If we tolerate mediocrity around us, then we allow it to thrive within us as well. A weak person, fearing feeling inferior or uncomfortable, avoids associating with those who remind him of his potential. He prefers to be the smartest in the company of the less intelligent, feeding his ego but slowing down his evolution. He chooses the comfort of approval over the challenge of growth, and it comes at a high cost. If he spends time with people without goals or aspirations, he inevitably adopts their mindset. If he is surrounded by lazy people, his own discipline weakens. If everyone around him sees obstacles instead of opportunities, he also begins to see problems in everything. A wise person acts very differently. He surrounds himself with mentors who inspire him, friends who are not afraid to tell the truth to his face, people who have already achieved more than he has, understanding that this discomfort is fuel for his development. Simple truth: if you are the smartest person in the room, you are not in the right room. Those who consciously approach the choice of their environment, giving preference to people who are purposeful, focused, and with strong moral principles, succeed and fully realize themselves. They do not avoid difficulties and frank conversations, understanding that the environment has a formative, contagious influence, and if you let this process take its course, it will shape you. Ask yourself the question, not taking it lightly: who surrounds you? Does your environment push you to develop, or, on the contrary, lull you to sleep? The pursuit of fleeting pleasures rather than discipline is one of the most destructive signs of immaturity. The modern world offers instant rewards at every turn, from fast food to endless entertainment. This creates an insidious trap in which a person seeking only fleeting joys gradually abandons his future, preferring the convenience of the moment to long-term growth and quick dopamine to lasting satisfaction, not realizing that he is exchanging his potential for crumbs of temporary happiness. Spending hours on social media, uncontrollably consuming food, and escaping from himself in entertainment, he feels devastated, realizing that he is missing precious days without creating anything. Louise spoke of the need to connect with a higher self that strives for growth, healing, and development. However, by giving in to impulses, we allow the lower self, which only craves comfort and pleasure, to take over. The lack of self-discipline makes people prisoners of their own desires, which modern society actively promotes, creating conditions for distraction, avoidance of deep work, and passive entertainment. Years pass, and a person, looking in the mirror, does not understand how he came to this result, realizing that he lived but did not awaken. Many, looking back, wonder, why didn't I become who I dreamed of being? The answer, as a rule, lies in those minor choices that they made day after day without questioning them. An immature person asks the question, what gives me pleasure now? The wise person formulates a more significant question, what will help me build a better future? This difference in thinking determines completely different destinies. Undisciplined people waste time on fleeting pleasures without thinking about the long-term consequences. The far-sighted invest time in developing the mind, taking care of the body, strengthening character, and creating a worthy life. A person without a goal spends days in front of the screen, letting life pass by, while the wise man trains, reads, learns, and creates. One person gets distracted from life, another prepares to conquer it. The immature one spends money on parties and unnecessary things, while the wise one understands the value of money as a tool, saving, investing, and using it to create security and freedom in the future. Lacking self-control, he jumps from one empty relationship to another, seeking connections where they do not exist. The wise one builds deep relationships, carefully chooses a partner, and values emotional stability, understanding that true love is not fleeting passion, but daily work, True success is achieved only by disciplined people, not through luck or talent, but through the constant choice of the difficult path. In the Bible, in Proverbs 21, verse 20, it says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." Great leaders, warriors, and thinkers of the past possessed discipline, waking up early, training their bodies and minds, avoiding pleasures that weaken the spirit, and having a clear purpose. Pleasure in itself is a trap. A fool pursues it without looking back, while the wise one controls and directs it to serve a meaningful life. If you do not control yourself, the world will control you, and that is too high a price to pay. And so we come to the last, but perhaps the most insidious, facet of self-destruction: the inability to learn from one's own mistakes. This type of spiritual blindness is especially dangerous because it subtly undermines our lives, condemning us to endlessly repeat the same mistakes in the vain hope of a different outcome. Imagine a person who repeatedly crashes into the same wall but continues to stubbornly go in the same direction, as if hoping that the obstacle will magically disappear. One who stubbornly refuses to learn from their failures is doomed to forever tread in place, never moving forward. Fate may give you new chances, open new horizons, grant new beginnings, but you, as if bewitched, will repeatedly sabotage your own efforts. Whether in your personal life, in taking care of your health, in managing your finances, or in striving for personal growth, you will invariably stumble over the same fatal stone. Do you recognize yourself or someone you know in this description? Perhaps you know someone who repeatedly enters into destructive relationships, pours out their soul about the pain inflicted, but stubbornly refuses to change their approach to building love. Or perhaps you observe someone systematically making poor financial decisions, mired in debt, but not even trying to analyze their harmful habits. And what about those who constantly postpone important matters, withdraw into themselves, abuse harmful substances, but never ask themselves, "What am I doing wrong?" Psychologists claim that we are prone to repeating those patterns of behavior that seem familiar to us, even if they cause us suffering. Familiarity creates a deceptive sense of security and comfort, which paralyzes our will to change. But here is the bitter truth of life. If you do not stop to carefully examine your recurring mistakes, you risk unconsciously building a life that you do not want at all. The ignorant person sees in every life trial a manifestation of universal injustice. He puts on the mask of a victim, looks for those to blame on the outside, scolds the past, former lovers, the political system, the economic situation for failures, but not himself. However, life, if listened to, appears as the wisest mentor. Albert Einstein accurately noted, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results." And life, it is worth noting, is very persistent. It will repeatedly present the same lessons, recurring mistakes, only clothed in a new form until you learn them. In contrast, a wise person, when faced with failure, pauses, observes, analyzes what happened. He asks himself questions. What lesson can I learn from this experience? What pattern am I repeating? What message is life trying to convey to me this time? And in this lies the main secret. Not to avoid mistakes, but to use them as steps for personal growth. After all, we are all prone to failures. We all make mistakes. The only difference is that some remain captive to their mistakes, while others find in them an incentive for development. Some tread in place, repeating what has been past. Others discover new facets in themselves. And if these arguments seem unconvincing, here is another distinctive sign. Narrow-minded people talk much more than they listen. They are pleased to hear their own voice. They interrupt their interlocutors without thinking, seize the initiative in conversation, express their opinion with an uncompromising certainty, as if it were the ultimate truth, but rarely ask questions and even less often show genuine interest in someone else's point of view. Why is this a sign of ignorance? Because the ability to listen is the key to knowledge. It is through listening that we build strong relationships, comprehend different perspectives on the world, and expand the horizons of our consciousness. A person who does not possess the art of listening blocks their own path to development. It is often said that in order to change your life, you must first open your mind. And this, in turn, begins with the ability to keep your mouth shut and open your heart to the perception of new things. Liberation from the shackles of ignorance is not a random stroke of luck, but a conscious, daily choice of every individual. True intellect grows not from the number of books read or the amount of accumulated information, but from cultivating mindfulness, forming a strong character, and developing self-control. In the next few minutes, we will look at specific steps that will help you forever break the vicious cycles that keep you in a state of stagnation and discover a completely new level of life. First of all, be extremely honest with yourself. Until you come face to face with the harsh truth, no changes will be possible. Give up the habit of justifying your mistakes. Stop creating illusory stories to protect your ego. Look at yourself with an unbiased eye. Ask yourself, in which areas of my life do I repeatedly make the same mistakes? Do I continue to blame the world around me for my failures, instead of taking responsibility for my own decisions? Do the people I associate with inspire me to develop or pull me down? Experience shows that genuine change begins with a fearless and unbiased look inside yourself. This is not about self-flagellation, but about taking responsibility for your actions. Not about self-punishment, but about awakening to a new reality. Secondly, maintain humility and openness to new knowledge. An ignoramus is convinced of their infallibility, while a wise person realizes that life is a continuous learning process. They are always ready to learn, listen attentively, and revise their beliefs. Question established truths, challenge accepted dogmas, and do not consider your point of view the only correct one. Remember that on the very day you decide that you have nothing more to learn, you will begin to fall behind in life. Thirdly, shape your environment consciously and purposefully. As the well-known wisdom says, we are a kind of arithmetic mean of the 5 people with whom we spend most of our time. And this is not just a beautiful motivational phrase, but a fundamental principle that determines our life. Our social circle has a tremendous impact on our thinking, shapes our daily habits, determines our level of ambition, and ultimately predetermines our destiny. Try to surround yourself with people who challenge you, make you think about complex issues, and tell you the truth to your face, even if it is bitter and unpleasant. Look for those who inspire you to self-discipline, concentration, and mindfulness. Remember that your future largely depends on who is next to you. Fourthly, learn from your mistakes with maximum return. We all make mistakes, suffer failures, and experience falls. This is an integral part of life's journey. However, what distinguishes a wise person from a fool is not the number of failures, but how they react to them. After each failure, it is necessary to stop and analyze the situation. Ask yourself questions. What went wrong? What could I have done differently next time? Each fall is a valuable lesson, but you can only learn it if you are willing to stop, listen to yourself, and draw appropriate conclusions. Life constantly presents us with the same tasks until we learn how to solve them. And as soon as this happens, everything will change dramatically. Intelligence is, first of all, a conscious choice. It is not about striving for perfection, but about striving for awareness, a desire to develop, a willingness to work hard, self-analyze, change what does not work, and take concrete measures to improve oneself. Unfortunately, most people do not do this. They continue to blame the world around them for their failures, hide behind excuses, and avoid responsibility. But you are not here by chance. You strive for more because deep down you feel ready to break out of the routine, move forward, grow, and rise above the grey mass. This is achieved through daily discipline, constant self-analysis, and an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. Do not stop there, do not settle for less, and do not let your spark fade. Your future depends on every decision you make from this moment on.